After my 2-year relationship ended, I thought I was ready to embrace the freedom of living alone again. I was wrong. At first, the quiet was comforting. I could come and go as I pleased, play music at any volume, and leave dishes in the sink without feeling judged. For the first couple of weeks, it felt like a vacation from responsibility. But as the days stretched into weeks and then months, the solitude began to creep under my skin, wrapping itself around me in a way that felt suffocating. The stillness of my corner townhouse wasn't peaceful anymore. It was oppressive. I'd come home from work and find myself staring at the walls, wondering if this was how the rest of my life would feel. To distract myself, I threw myself back into dating apps. Tinder, Bumble, Hinge. It didn't matter. I just needed the possibility of someone else's presence in my life, even if it was fleeting. It felt different now, though. In college, swiping was fun and exciting, a game to pass the time. But now, in my late 20s, it felt hollow. The endless cycle of matching, chatting, and ghosting reminded me how disconnected I really was. One evening, I matched with a girl named Tracy. She had striking red hair in her photos and a broad smile that seemed genuine. She wasn't conventionally beautiful, but there was something about her that intrigued me. We chatted briefly before she gave me her Snapchat. I wasn't expecting much. It had become the norm for people to exchange social media, only to fade into the background of each other's lives, reduced to a dot in a long list of watched stories. Tracy was no exception. After a day or two of casual snaps, our communication dwindled to nothing. She'd occasionally view my stories, but that was the extent of it. Weeks passed, and I all but forgot about her. Then, in December, I posted a story about my undecorated living room, mentioning how it didn't feel like Christmas without a tree. To my surprise, Tracy replied. She struck up a conversation, asking if I was planning to decorate. Her sudden interest caught me off guard, but I decided to play along. I mentioned some festive activities I'd been considering, ice skating, visiting the local Christmas village, but she suggested something more intimate, decorating my tree together. At first I hesitated. Inviting a near stranger into my home wasn't something I usually did, but I convinced myself it wasn't a big deal. What harm could it do? My fake tree was still in the attic, and honestly, I'd been procrastinating getting it out because it was a hassle to handle alone. Tracy's offer seemed like a good excuse to finally get it done. We agreed she'd come over that evening around 9 p.m. As the day wore on, I found myself growing more nervous than I expected. It had been a while since I'd had anyone over, let alone someone I barely knew. Around 7:30, I decided to make the house presentable. I rushed to the liquor store to grab a couple of bottles of wine, thinking it might help loosen the mood. When I got back, I vacuumed, swept, and wiped down the counters. The house wasn't filthy, but it wasn't as pristine as it had been when my ex lived here. It was only after she left that I realized how much she'd done to keep things tidy. Now, with just me, the place got messy fast. By 9 p.m., the house was clean, the wine was chilling, and the living room was set up to feel cozy and inviting. I lit a couple of candles and queued up some Christmas music. I even turned on the TV and sat on the couch, pretending to watch a movie to calm my nerves. But as the minutes ticked by, Tracy didn't show. At first, I tried to be patient. People run late all the time, right? But by 9:15, I was starting to feel irritated. By 9:30, I'd convinced myself she wasn't coming. Then, finally, she texted, "I'm outside." When I opened the door, my first impression of her was unexpected. She was taller than I anticipated, easily over 6 feet, and her frame seemed almost imposing as she stepped into the doorway. I'm 5'10", so I'm not exactly short, but standing next to her, I felt dwarfed. She was dressed casually, but there was something slightly disheveled about her appearance. Her red hair was vibrant, but unkempt, and she wore a heavy layer of perfume that immediately assaulted my senses. Beneath it, there was a faint, unpleasant smell that made me instinctively step back. She greeted me with a wide smile that didn't quite reach her eyes and walked past me into the living room without hesitation. Her energy was strange. overly familiar, as if we'd known each other for years. Yet there was an odd detachment in the way she moved. She sat down on the couch, close enough that our legs touched, and I felt a wave of discomfort. I offered her a glass of wine, hoping it would help break the tension. She accepted eagerly, and we clinked glasses. But as we talked, it became increasingly clear that the person in front of me wasn't the Tracy I'd imagined from her photos or our brief chats. She seemed older, rougher, and her social cues were off. She laughed at odd moments and occasionally stared at me for just a beat too long. Then, it happened. She tipped her glass too far, spilling a splash of red wine onto my light blue couch. My stomach clenched, but I forced a smile. "It's okay," I said, rushing to grab paper towels and a sponge. She apologized repeatedly, but her voice lacked genuine remorse. As I blotted the stain, I could feel my patience wearing thin. To change the mood, I suggested we get the Christmas tree out of the attic. She followed me upstairs, and together we hauled the pieces down. I was surprised by her strength. She handled the heaviest sections with ease, carrying them as if they weighed nothing. Once the tree was assembled, I poured us more wine. I drank faster this time, hoping to dull the unease that had been building since she arrived. When it came time to decorate, I went to the crawl space to retrieve the bins of ornaments my parents had given me. As I climbed back up the stairs with the first bin, I felt a strange dizziness. My head was swimming, and my limbs felt heavier than they should have. I hadn't drunk enough to feel this way, but I brushed it off, assuming I was just tired. When I reached the living room, Tracy was gone. At first I thought she'd gone to the bathroom, but the door was open, and the light was off. I called her name, my voice echoing through the house. No response. I checked the kitchen, the bedrooms, even the front porch, but she was nowhere to be found. Her sudden disappearance sent a chill down my spine. I sank onto the couch, the dizziness intensifying. My phone felt heavy in my hand as I checked Snapchat to see if she'd opened my last message. She hadn't. My eyelids grew heavier, and before I could piece together what was happening, everything went black. When I woke, the room was pitch dark. The TV was off, the candles extinguished. For a moment I thought I was dreaming, but then I heard it. A faint sound, like breathing, coming from somewhere nearby. My heart pounded as I fumbled for my phone. The screen lit up, casting a dim glow across the room. And that's when I saw it. A tall silhouette stood just a few feet in front of me, completely still. My breath caught in my throat. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Tracy." She didn't respond. She just stood there staring down at me. Gathering every ounce of courage, I turned on my phone's flashlight. The beam illuminated her face and I froze. Her expression was blank, her eyes empty. She looked like a stranger, a shadow of the person who'd walked through my door hours earlier. Without warning, she turned and sprinted toward the stairs. The sound of her footsteps was deafening, each thud echoing through the house. I heard the front door slam, and then silence. When I finally mustered the strength to move, I checked Snapchat. Her account was gone. She'd blocked me. I searched the house, my hands trembling as I opened each drawer and cabinet. All my medications were missing: Adderall, vitamins, even an old bottle of Oxy I'd kept after surgery. A bottle of vodka was gone too, but nothing else seemed to be missing. The police came and took my statement, but there wasn't much they could do. I didn't know her real name, and her Snapchat account was a dead end. My neighbors hadn't seen or heard anything unusual. Looking back, I'm certain Tracy wasn't who she claimed to be. I think she was older, possibly homeless, and likely battling a drug addiction. But the image that haunts me most isn't her empty eyes or her strange behavior. It's the memory of her shadowy figure standing over me in the dark, watching as I lay helpless on the couch. Even now, months later, I can't sit in my living room without feeling that same chill run down my spine. It was Christmas Eve in 1997, and I was 7 years old. For most kids my age, this night would have been full of excitement, dreams of presents under the tree, and the magic of Santa Claus. But for my family, it was just another evening. Being Jewish, we didn't celebrate Christmas. The holiday season felt like an elaborate show happening around us, one we didn't have tickets to attend. My dad, a dedicated doctor, always volunteered to work during Christmas. He wasn't a fan of the holiday anyway, and he figured it was the least he could do for his colleagues who celebrated. That left my little sister, Sarah, and me at home alone most years. Well, not entirely alone. Our mom was technically there. But there might be a stretch. Mom was a drinker. At 7, I didn't know the word alcoholic. I didn't understand the way the bottles on the kitchen counter multiplied as the sun went down, or why her voice got loud and slurred before she retreated to her bedroom to sleep it off. All I knew was that by nighttime, she was out cold, unreachable. That left me, the older sibling, to take care of Sarah and myself. The night started quietly. Sarah and I were sprawled on the worn-out carpet in the living room, the glow of our old box TV lighting up the room as we watched cartoons. The snowstorm outside rattled the windows, and the house felt cold despite the heater struggling to keep up. I remember thinking how big and empty the house felt without Dad. Even the soft sound of Sarah humming to herself didn't do much to break the eerie quiet. I don't remember the exact time it happened, but it must have been after dinner. We were still in the living room when a knock came at the door. It was a loud, deliberate knock, the kind that makes your stomach flip before you even know why. I froze for a moment, and Sarah, clutching her stuffed bunny, looked at me with wide eyes. "Who is it?" she whispered. "I don't know," I said, my voice barely louder than hers. I was scared, but I didn't want her to see it. As the older sibling, I always felt like it was my job to be brave. I got up and walked slowly to the front door. Our door had these old glass panes at the top, and when I stood on my tiptoes to look through them, I saw a man standing outside. He was dressed in a Santa suit, complete with the red coat, white trim, and a floppy hat. He was holding a large sack, the kind you see in holiday movies. When he saw me, he smiled and waved. "Hey there, kid," he called out, his voice muffled by the door. "It's me, Santa. Let me in and I'll give you your presents." I didn't open the door. Something about him felt wrong. For one thing, we didn't celebrate Christmas. Why would Santa Claus show up at our house? And why did his smile seem so forced, so off? I glanced back at Sarah, who was watching from the living room. She looked as confused as I felt. "Santa doesn't give presents to Jewish kids," I said finally, my voice firm. The man's smile flickered just for a second, but then he chuckled. "Oh, of course I do. This year I decided to visit all the good boys and girls no matter what they celebrate. I didn't want anyone to feel left out." I shook my head. "We already got our presents during Hanukkah." The smile disappeared completely now, replaced by something darker. "Just open the door," he said, his voice sharper. "I've got something special for you and your sister." My stomach twisted. I didn't know what to do. My instinct screamed at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot, staring at him through the glass. "Sarah," I said over my shoulder, trying to keep my voice steady. "Call 911. Sarah, bless her, didn't hesitate. She grabbed the phone from the end table and started dialing. But the man must have heard me because his expression twisted into something angry and desperate. He stepped closer to the door, his face inches from the glass. "You think the cops are going to come?" he snarled. "They won't believe you. Now open the door, or you're going to regret it." Sarah was crying now, holding the phone to her ear. "They don't believe me," she sobbed. "The lady says it's not an emergency." I took the phone from her, my hands shaking. The operator's voice on the other end sounded annoyed. "This line is for emergencies only," she said before hanging up. I was on my own. My mom was passed out upstairs, and the only adult who could help us was miles away at the hospital. The man outside started banging on the door again, harder this time, each knock making my heart jump. "Open the door!" he shouted. "I know the cops aren't coming! Let me in!" I looked around, desperate for a solution. My eyes landed on the menorah sitting on the kitchen counter. The idea hit me like a bolt of lightning. Not a good idea, but the only one I had. "Stay here," I told Sarah. "Don't go near the door." I ran to the kitchen, grabbed the candles from the menorah, and lit them one by one. My hands were trembling so badly that I almost dropped the lighter. Once they were all lit, I carried them to the smoke detector in the hallway and held them underneath it. The flames flickered, and I could feel the heat against my face, but I didn't care. I blew out the candles quickly, letting the smoke rise. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the alarm blared to life, the high-pitched screech filling the house. I dropped the candles and ran back to Sarah, pulling her away from the door. "Don't go outside," I told her. "Stay here with me." Outside, I heard the man curse loudly. But then, instead of running, he started shouting again. I peeked out the window and saw him waving his arms as a fire truck pulled up to the curb, red and blue lights flashing. "Thank God you're here," he called out to the firefighters. "I'm their dad. I locked myself out and there's a fire inside. You've got to break down the door and get my kids out." My blood ran cold. He was trying to use the fire department to get inside. One of the firefighters stepped forward, axe in hand, ready to break down the door. I panicked and pressed myself against the door. "No!" I screamed. "He's lying! He's not our dad!" The firefighter hesitated. "What's going on?" he asked. "Our dad's at the hospital," I said, tears streaming down my face. "We're Jewish. We don't celebrate Christmas. Please don't let him in." I pointed to the menorah on the table and the kippah on my head. The firefighter frowned and turned back to the man. "Why would Santa visit a Jewish home?" he asked. The man stammered, trying to come up with an answer, but it was too late. Two of the firefighters tackled him to the ground while another called the police. Within minutes, officers arrived and took the man into custody. One of the officers stayed with us until my dad got home. When he arrived, he looked furious and terrified. He hugged us both tightly, his hands trembling. "What happened?" he asked, his voice breaking. The officer explained everything while Dad carried Sarah and me upstairs. He woke up my mom, who had no idea what had happened. He didn't yell at her in front of us, but I could tell he was angry. Mostly, though, he was relieved that we were okay. To this day, I don't know who the man was or what he wanted. The police said he had a record, but they wouldn't tell us more. All I know is that if I had opened that door, Sarah and I might not have lived to see the next morning. That Christmas Eve, being Jewish saved our lives. It was December 2022, and my girlfriend Charlotte and I were heading to the Pocono Mountains for a much-needed getaway. We'd rented a cozy-looking Airbnb, decked out with Christmas decorations, and situated on a large property surrounded by dense woods. The listing had promised a picturesque escape, complete with a hot tub on the deck and a stunning view of the snowy landscape. To top it off, a snowstorm was forecasted for that night, adding to the festive, wintry vibe we were craving. From the city, it was about a 4-hour drive to the Poconos. We made decent time, stopping only at a Family Dollar to grab snacks and groceries. As we neared the Airbnb, the rural roads grew darker, the trees denser, and the houses more spaced apart. Finally, we spotted the gravel road that led uphill through a clearing in the trees to the property. The house came into view, a charming cabin-like structure adorned with Christmas decorations, a glowing snowman, candy canes lining the pathway, and light-up reindeer scattered across the yard. It was perfect, almost too perfect, like a scene out of a Christmas movie. We parked and began unloading the car, trudging back and forth through the crunchy snow to carry our bags and groceries inside. The house was just as cozy as the pictures had promised, with a tall Christmas tree twinkling in the corner, stockings hung on the walls, and the faint scent of pine mixed with wood smoke. There was even a stack of logs by the large fireplace in the living room. 3 bedrooms, though we only needed one, added to the spaciousness, and the loft upstairs boasted a pool table and couches for lounging. The basement, however, had a starkly different vibe. It was cold, dimly lit, and felt more like a utility space than part of the home. I made a mental note to avoid it. As Charlotte and I settled in, the snow began to fall heavier, blanketing the property in an eerie, quiet stillness. While she organized the kitchen, I wandered the house, peeking out windows and marveling at the snowfall. Just as I was starting to feel completely at ease, there was a knock at the front door. It wasn't a friendly, tentative knock. It was loud and deliberate, cutting through the calm like a knife. I froze, then glanced at Charlotte, who was standing by the counter. "Did Mike say he'd be stopping by?" she asked, her voice uncertain. I shook my head, walked to the door, and cautiously peeked through the window. A man was standing on the porch, mid-40s by the look of him, wearing gray sweatpants and a tattered yellowish-brown jacket that had clearly seen better days. His face was thin, his smile stretched unnaturally wide. "Hey there," he said brightly, his voice muffled by the glass. "How are you folks doing tonight?" I cracked the door slightly, keeping the chain lock engaged. "Hi, are you the host?" I asked, unsure what else to say. The man nodded. "That's right, I'm Tom. I run this place with my brother. Just wanted to swing by and make sure everything's to your liking." I found it odd that he knew I was with my girlfriend. Charlotte hadn't even come to the door, and I hadn't mentioned her. Maybe Mike had told him about us. "Thanks," I said cautiously. "Everything's great so far." Tom smiled again, but there was something about it that unsettled me. "I live just up the road," he said. "If you folks need anything, don't hesitate to holler." "Got it. Thanks," I said quickly, wanting to end the interaction. As he turned and disappeared into the snow, I shut the door and locked it firmly. "That was weird," I muttered, heading back to the living room. Charlotte frowned. "What's weird?" I explained the encounter, and while she didn't seem as bothered as I was, the uneasy feeling lingered. We decided to shake it off and focus on enjoying our night. We cooked a simple but hearty dinner: chicken thighs, roasted broccoli, potatoes, and cornbread, then curled up on the couch to watch the Polar Express. The Christmas tree lights cast a warm glow across the room, and for a while, everything felt perfect again. After the movie, we decided to brave the cold and hop in the hot tub. The idea of sitting in steaming water while snow fell around us was too tempting to resist. Outside, the snow was coming down hard, covering the decorations in the yard. We cranked up the heat in the tub and slipped in, savoring the contrast between the freezing air and the bubbling warmth. Bliss turned to dread when, suddenly, the hot tub went silent. The bubbles stopped, and we were plunged into an eerie stillness. Then we heard it. Footsteps crunching through the snow. They were slow, deliberate, and moving somewhere on the property. Charlotte's eyes widened. "Do you think it's Tom?" "Maybe," I whispered, though deep down I wasn't so sure. "Should I call out?" She shook her head quickly. "Number, don't draw attention to us." We sat there barely breathing as the footsteps grew fainter and eventually disappeared into the night. I told Charlotte it was probably a deer, but the lie felt thin even as I said it. We decided to head back inside and take a shower before bed. The shower was brief, as the hot water ran ice cold within minutes. We screamed and jumped out, shivering and frustrated. I messaged Mike, the host, about the issue, and he replied apologetically, promising to send someone to check it out in the morning. We fell into bed, exhausted and uneasy. But sleep didn't last long. Around 3 a.m., we were jolted awake by loud, aggressive banging on the front door. Charlotte gripped my arm, her face pale with fear. "Don't go out there," she whispered urgently. The banging came again, each thud vibrating through the house. I wanted to investigate, but Charlotte begged me to stay in the bedroom. After a few minutes, the banging stopped, leaving us in a tense, suffocating silence. We whispered back and forth, trying to make sense of it. Eventually, exhaustion overtook us, and we drifted back to sleep. In the morning, I stepped outside to wipe snow off the Jeep and noticed something chilling. Fresh footprints in the snow. They circled the house, leading to and from the front door. My stomach dropped. These weren't old tracks. They were fresh. Someone had been outside while we slept. As I stood there, I heard footsteps approaching. I turned to see Tom emerging from behind the car, his yellowish jacket unmistakable. He greeted me with the same unsettling smile and said he was there to check the hot water heater. I mentioned the footprints and the knocking from the night before, and his response made my skin crawl. "There are strange folks out here who like to snoop around at night," he said casually. "But don't worry, they're harmless." Harmless? I wasn't convinced. He headed inside, walking around before descending into the basement. I sent a quick message to Mike, letting him know Tom was there. Mike's reply sent a cold wave of fear through me. "Who's Tom?" "I don't have a brother." My heart pounded as I realized what was happening. "Charlotte," I whispered urgently, "we need to leave. Now." We packed as quickly and quietly as possible, shoving everything into the car in one trip. As I started the engine, I glanced in the rearview mirror and saw Tom sprinting toward us. Without hesitation, I floored it, speeding down the snowy road. We called Mike from the car and explained everything. He promised to contact the police. 20 minutes later, he called back to say the house was empty when the officers arrived. No sign of anyone. To this day, I can't shake the feeling of being watched, of knowing that man had been there the entire time. What his intentions were, I'll never know. But one thing is certain, we left just in time. Christmas has always been my favorite holiday. There's something magical about it. The shimmering lights, the scent of pine, and the infectious cheer that seems to settle in the air. It was Christmas Day in 2018, and for the first time since Grace and I had started dating, I was going to meet her family. I'd never been more excited or nervous. Grace and I had been together for almost a year. She was the kind of person who could light up any room she entered. Her smile was contagious, her laugh enchanting, and she had this way of making everyone feel instantly comfortable. I, on the other hand, have always been more reserved, preferring quiet evenings at home over social gatherings. Still, I wanted to make a good impression on her family, and Christmas seemed like the perfect opportunity. Her parents lived in a small, picturesque town about an hour away. The drive there was peaceful, the roads lined with snow-covered trees that glistened in the sunlight. Grace sang along to Christmas songs on the radio, her voice soft and sweet, while I focused on the winding road ahead. As we approached her childhood home, I couldn't help but feel a mix of excitement and apprehension. The house was everything I'd imagined and more. It was a cozy two-story home with a wraparound porch adorned with strings of colorful lights. A large wreath hung on the front door, and smoke billowed from the chimney, promising warmth and comfort inside. Grace's family greeted us warmly, pulling us into hugs and ushering us into the living room, where a massive Christmas tree stood proudly, its ornaments twinkling in the soft glow of the lights. For the first few hours, everything was perfect. Grace's parents were kind and welcoming, her siblings were lively and fun, and the food was incredible. We shared stories, laughed over old family photos, and exchanged small gifts. Despite my initial nervousness, I found myself beginning to relax, at least for a little while. But as the evening wore on, I started to feel the familiar weight of social exhaustion creeping in. Being around new people, especially for extended periods, has always drained me. It's not that I don't like people, I do. But I've always been someone who values solitude and quiet moments. By the time dinner was over, I was silently counting down the minutes until we could leave. Then came the snowstorm. What had started as a light flurry earlier in the day had turned into a full-blown blizzard by nightfall. The snow piled up faster than I thought possible, and by the time we were ready to leave, the roads were completely impassable. Grace's parents insisted we stay the night, and while Grace seemed thrilled by the idea, I wasn't exactly overjoyed. I wasn't going to complain, though. Safety came first, and I was grateful to have a warm place to sleep. Grace's mom quickly set up a guest room for us, complete with fluffy blankets and a space heater. We settled in, turning on a random horror movie to pass the time. Grace, ever the heavy sleeper, drifted off halfway through the film, her head resting on my chest. I, however, was wide awake. The wind outside howled against the windows, and I could hear the occasional creak of the old house settling. I tried to focus on the movie, but my mind kept wandering. There was something unsettling about being in a strange house in the middle of a snowstorm, surrounded by darkness. Then I heard it, a faint scratching sound coming from outside the bedroom window. At first, I told myself it was just the wind, or maybe a tree branch brushing against the glass. But the sound was rhythmic, deliberate, like someone, or something, was intentionally making it. My heart began to race, but I stayed put, not wanting to wake Grace for what was probably nothing. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, willing myself to calm down. But then came the scream. It was faint at first, almost like the wind had carried it from far away. But it grew louder, more distinct, until there was no mistaking it. It was a scream, raw, desperate, and full of terror. My blood ran cold and I bolted upright, careful not to wake Grace. I hesitated for a moment before walking over to the window. Peeling back the curtain just enough to peek outside, I scanned the snowy backyard. At first, I saw nothing but shadows cast by the trees and the glow of the porch light. Then I saw him. A man stood motionless in the backyard, his dark silhouette stark against the snow. He was facing the house, looking directly at the window where I stood. My breath caught in my throat as I froze, unsure of what to do. I tried to wake Grace, shaking her shoulder gently at first, then more urgently. But she was out cold, her steady breathing unaffected by my attempts. Frustrated and terrified, I decided to investigate on my own, a decision I would come to regret. Grabbing my coat and boots, I slipped outside, the icy air hitting me like a wall. The man was no longer standing where I'd seen him, but fresh footprints in the snow led toward the shed at the back of the property. Against every ounce of common sense, I followed them. The closer I got to the shed, the louder the scratching sound became. It was sharper now, almost metallic, like a knife scraping against steel. My hands trembled as I reached for the door, which was slightly ajar. Inside, the faint light from the house illuminated just enough for me to see him. The man was hunched over in the corner, his back to me. He wore a dark coat and had wild, curly black hair. In his hand, he held a sledgehammer, its metal head glinting faintly. "Hey!" I called out, my voice trembling despite my attempt to sound authoritative. The man didn't respond. He didn't even flinch. Then, slowly, he turned to face me. His eyes locked onto mine, and a twisted smile spread across his face. My heart stopped as he took a step forward, raising the sledgehammer. I didn't wait to see what he would do next. I turned and ran as fast as I could, the snow slowing my movements as I screamed for help. I could hear his heavy footsteps behind me, but when I turned to look, he was gone. Bursting through the front door, I locked it behind me and raced upstairs to wake Grace. This time she woke immediately, startled by my panic. Her parents and siblings soon joined us, and I recounted everything that had happened. Her father checked the security cameras, and sure enough, the man appeared on the footage. But the angle was poor, and his face remained obscured. After a few minutes, he disappeared into the woods, leaving no trace but his footprints in the snow. To my shock, Grace's parents brushed the whole thing off as a prank. They insisted there was no need to call the police and assured me that everything was fine. But I knew better. The man hadn't been out there for fun. He had been there for something far more sinister. I barely slept that night, every creak and shadow setting my nerves on edge. By morning, the storm had passed, and Grace and I left as soon as we could. I haven't been back to her parents' house since. Grace doesn't understand why, and I haven't told her the full extent of my fear. But the truth is, I'll never forget that man's face, or the way he vanished into the night like a ghost. Whatever he wanted that night, I'm just grateful I escaped with my life. Last Christmas Eve was supposed to be a peaceful night, one filled with joy and anticipation for the morning to come. It was a tradition in our home to have a quiet evening the night before Christmas, a time for family, relaxation, and reflection. The house, blanketed in snow, felt like something out of a postcard. Our Christmas tree glowed softly in the living room, its colorful lights reflecting in the windows as the snow continued to fall outside. My two boys, Luke and Logan, ages 5 and 8 respectively, had already gone to bed after an evening spent laughing, playing, and eagerly counting the hours until Christmas morning. My wife, always the planner and caretaker, had also retired early after ensuring everything was ready for the next day. For me, the silence was a gift in itself. As I sank into the couch, the house wrapped around me like a comforting embrace. I had a steaming cup of hot chocolate in hand, the fireplace crackling softly in the corner. A random Christmas movie played on the TV, some cheesy classic I wasn't really paying attention to. Instead, I was scrolling through my phone, catching up on the world, and enjoying a rare moment of solitude. It was one of those nights that felt like nothing could go wrong, like the world itself was at peace. The stillness was broken by a sound. At first, it was faint, a dull thud that seemed to come from the far end of the house. My attention snapped from my phone to the hallway, and for a moment, I simply sat there listening. It could have been anything: the house settling, a branch brushing against the siding, or even something falling over in one of the boys' rooms. Still, there was something about the sound that didn't sit right with me. I stood, setting my mug down and walking through the living room. The glow from the tree illuminated the hallway as I made my way toward the bedrooms. Peeking into the boys' room, I saw them both sound asleep, their small bodies rising and falling with each breath. I smiled to myself, reassured by the sight, and quietly closed the door. The sound came again, this time louder. A distinct bang echoed through the house, and my heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the kind of noise you could easily explain away. It was deliberate, forceful, as if someone, or something, was pounding on the walls. I checked the master bedroom next. My wife was still sound asleep, her breathing steady and unbothered. Whatever I'd heard, it hadn't woken her, and I decided not to disturb her just yet. Instead, I walked through the rest of the house, turning on lights as I went. I checked the kitchen, the dining room, even the laundry room, but everything seemed normal. The rational part of me wanted to dismiss it. Maybe the wind had picked up, or maybe some animal had brushed against the house, but the sound had been too deliberate, too specific, to ignore. I found myself standing by the sliding glass door in the dining room, staring out into the dark expanse of our backyard. Snow covered everything in a pristine layer, unbroken and untouched. It was quiet, so quiet that even the faintest sound would have stood out. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end as I opened the door and stepped outside. The cold hit me immediately, biting through my thin sweater and slippers, but I didn't care. My eyes scanned the yard, the trees, the shadows. Nothing moved. Nothing seemed out of place. And then, just as I was about to turn back, I heard it, a scream. It was faint, but unmistakable. High-pitched, desperate, and filled with a terror that froze me in place. My mind immediately recognized it. Luke, my youngest son. I ran back inside, my heart pounding so hard I could barely think. I threw open the door to the boys' room, flipping on the light. Logan sat up in bed, startled and confused, but Luke was gone. The window was wide open. Cold air rushed into the room, the curtains flapping in the wind. Snow had begun to collect on the sill, and my heart dropped into my stomach. "Where's Luke?" I demanded, my voice shaking as I turned to Logan. I don't know," he stammered, his eyes wide with fear. "Go wake up Mom. Tell her to call the police," I ordered, my voice sharper than I intended. Logan scrambled out of bed and ran down the hall as I rushed to my bedroom. I opened the safe and grabbed my handgun, my hands trembling as I loaded it. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to plan. My son was out there, and whoever had taken him wasn't going to get far. The cold hit me like a wall as I ran outside, flashlight in one hand, gun in the other. "Luke!" I screamed, my voice echoing into the trees. "Luke, where are you?" A faint cry answered me, muffled and distant. It came from the woods that bordered our property, and I sprinted toward it without hesitation. My breath came in sharp, visible puffs as I plunged into the trees, the flashlight beam bouncing with each step. "Luke!" I yelled again, my voice breaking. The cry came again, weaker this time, but it was enough to guide me. The woods were dense, the snow crunching loudly beneath my boots as I pushed forward. I knew these woods like the back of my hand, but in the darkness, everything felt unfamiliar. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Not mine. I froze, my flashlight darting through the trees. The sound was faint but deliberate, the unmistakable crunch of someone moving through the snow. My pulse quickened as I tried to pinpoint the direction, my breath catching in my throat. "Who's there?" I called out, my voice firm but unsteady. No response. I moved forward cautiously, every sense on high alert. The footsteps stopped, replaced by a different sound, a muffled gasp, almost as if someone was trying to hold their breath. My flashlight caught movement ahead, and for a moment, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. A shadow moved quickly through the trees, too fast for me to make out any details. My grip on the gun tightened as I followed, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. And then I saw him. A man, dressed in black, crouched low to the ground. He was holding something, or someone. As the flashlight beam landed on him, he turned, and I saw Luke beneath him, struggling weakly. "Get off him!" I shouted, raising the gun. The man hesitated for a split second before bolting into the woods, disappearing into the shadows. I ran to Luke, dropping to my knees as I pulled him into my arms. He was pale and barely conscious, his small body trembling against the cold. "It's okay, buddy. I've got you," I whispered, tears streaming down my face as I held him tightly. I didn't stop running until I reached the house. The police were already there, and my wife met me at the door, sobbing as she wrapped her arms around us. Luke was taken to the hospital, where doctors confirmed he would be okay. The bruises and scratches on his neck told the story of how close we'd come to losing him. The man who had taken him was never caught. Despite the police searching the woods and taking my statement, he vanished without a trace. To this day, I can't stop thinking about that night. The sound of Luke's scream, the sight of that man in the woods, and the overwhelming fear that I might not have reached him in time. It all haunts me. I don't know who he was, or why he chose my family, but I do know one thing. I'll never let my guard down again. Christmas Eve used to be my favorite night of the year. Now it's a reminder of just how fragile happiness can be.